for the next 2 or 3 minutes. And then we'll get into the heart of our conversation today. And I would encourage you, as you're listening to the music, to just open your mind and let whatever comes to your mind, comes to your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, what you feel in your body as you listen to this music opening the session. I encourage you to just be open to that and to meditate a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to share this. So I just want to thank Sobhaz very much. Yeah, big applause there. And thank you, Sobhaz, for sharing that. And really to kick things, we're going to kick things off with Sobhaz. And then we'll have Dr. Brigham speak, and then Dr. Ashwani Kumar, and hear their perspectives. And I'll type the question in the chat as well, just so people can see the question. Really, what I wanted to do was create a space today for us to have a conversation and to hear different perspectives on this idea of how different approaches to curriculum and designing learning related to cooperation and co-ops and the co-op model, how we could enhance learning for more diverse range of learners in relation to these topics, how we can use cooperation more in our communities, how the co-op model, as we understand it in different ways, could be used to help solve problems and address challenges in community. So that's really the focus of the conversation. And what I'm going to ask is for Sobhaz to share his perspective, to introduce himself, and then to share his perspective on that question and his own personal experience with that question. And then same thing for Dr. Brigham, and same thing for Dr. Ashwani Kumar. So I'll start with Sobhaz, and we'll hopefully have some, you'll have about 3 minutes to introduce yourself, Sobhaz, and about 5 minutes to speak to the topic. We'll see if we have time for follow-up questions, same for our other speakers. And for anybody who has questions or thoughts or comments who's in the audience, I'd encourage you to put them in the chat, and we'll see if we have some time at the end as well to maybe address any questions in the chat or thoughts and comments that come up. Okay, over to you, Sobhaz.
Great, thank you, Laurie. Hello to everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm in transit, so I apologize if you can hear the engine going away, but I'll be brief. My name is Sobhaz Benjamin. I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this conversation. Thank you, Laurie, and a real pleasure to be rubbing shoulders with everybody else, including Dr. Kumar and Dr. Brigham. I run a not-for-profit in the north end of Halifax called In My Own Voice, I Move Arts Association. I've run that organization since 2007. Well, the idea for it came about in 2007, and we launched our first program in 2009. And I'm so glad that Laurie has framed this to be able to talk about this in a personal way, because that's where I want to begin. And I sort of tip my hat to Dr. Brigham and Dr. Kumar, because obviously you've had a high level of success in the academic arena, becoming professors, and I can only imagine what that journey must have been like, because I'd like to reflect on my journey as a storyteller, particularly through film. I sort of, the academy, I've always sort of been at odds with the academy. I think mainly because I always try to find myself in the learnings. So if we're reading about Shakespeare or we're doing geometry, or I'm always trying to find a point of entry. And for most of my education, I've not really found that point of entry. I had to have created that point of entry myself. And
Oops, I think we're losing Sobhaz.
Sobhaz, you seem to be cutting in and out a little bit. So you might need to go out and come back in with the Zoom. Oh, there he is, back again. Sobhaz, maybe turn off your camera, and that could help.
I think he's also in the car. I think that might be causing an issue.
That's the challenge.
If he is on a highway.
So I'll just text him. I'm wondering, Dr. Brigham, if you could go now, and then we'll get Sobhaz sorted out a little bit technically. And we'll get you to go ahead, if that's okay.
Yes.
So if you want to just introduce yourself and then answer the question from your own personal experience and perspective as well. Oh, Sobhaz, are you back?
He's back.
I hope so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you okay. If maybe turn off your camera if we're having bandwidth issues.
Sure.
Okay, let's try that again.
So I'm not sure where I got lost, where we got disconnected, but I'm just going to say that I'm going to pick up from where I was talking about film production for me, and that it was a place, because I wasn't very technically oriented, film production was a challenge, but also because at the heart of storytelling is conflict. And for a long time, I imagined sort of, as being part of the diaspora, the African diaspora. I didn't really have a concrete sense of African sense of identity, and had to find that and seek that out. So for a long time, conflict for me was this Western Aristotelian idea that was at the heart of story, and I just was convinced that for me as a storyteller of African descent, conflict was just too front and center. There were things like Ubuntu that spoke to me about this idea of community, that I am because we are. And so, but I've come and settled down that conflict is a part of, is universal. Reading Things Fall Apart sort of did that for me as well, and other African authored texts to discover, and also just the state of affairs on the continent as well. But it was really very much a struggle, is what I'm trying to say, and because of that struggle, I, fast forward 20 plus years, I created In My Own Voice, this not-for-profit organization focused on reintegration, or integration in the first instance, in my opinion, because marginalized people, particularly racialized people, are haven't really been integrated into the the Western or North American culture. So I think I argue people who are getting out of prison and are being integrated in the first instance, and so film production is sort of very low hanging fruit. I mean, it's only in recent years that people have gone to school to learn to be filmmakers. But in the old days, you would find somebody who knew the ropes and would be willing to show you. So it would be like an apprenticeship is what would occur. So many people who get out of prison. So in the reintegration program that I run, and many people who get out of prison, they will sort of get pushed into construction, because again, it's the point of entry is pretty low. I think cultural production is very similar. You have a low entry point. You don't necessarily need to go to school for to learn how to film or do photography or these sorts of things. Like I said, if you find somebody who knows what to do and is willing to teach you, it's that simple. And so I think for me, the curriculum that has developed out of the not-for-profit that I run has taken all of those that learning approach into consideration. Very often I was told by the institution at York that each year it was competitive, and the goal was really to you'd have about 250 students entering into the film program back when I was there, and when we graduated there was something like 50 people. So it was a weeding down process and a weeding out process, and I was fortunate enough to graduate, but there are a lot of my classmates who didn't make it through, simply because, well, for me the challenge was seeing myself reflected in the curriculum, not seeing that, and having to kind of really struggle with storytelling in a context that felt a little foreign to me, a little foreign. The stories that I was interested in telling about my family, about my children, about my partner, weren't necessarily the stories that were being told by my classmates. I love exploding sinks and car chases and these sorts of things, but didn't really see myself reflected in the stories that sort of pictured those sorts of things. So the curriculum that has been put in place has really been about finding people who are willing to share their knowledge, share their networks, and be able to open that up to people, marginalized folks, racialized folks, who are then able to build on that capacity, and then also their networks open up, and we begin to tell stories that are from points of views that are sort of very, not that visible or present in the current sort of media landscape. And that's based on, like I said, based on cooperation, based on a coming together, and based on sort of stripping away the competitiveness, stripping away the exclusiveness, because the film industry itself also is a challenging space. It's a very specialized language that, you know, people can be sort of marginalized very easily because they don't speak or understand the language. So all of these things I took into consideration when I was creating and working with Laurie. Laurie has been involved in this work with me as well, to create a space where people could learn, but removing barriers, and also a place where we could help each other. That whole idea of a rising tide raises all ships is a wonderful metaphor, and I think that's what I subscribe to. So that's all I'll share for now. Yeah, does that sound okay to folks?
That's perfect timing. Oh my God, you're right on the money.
Great.
That's great. Thank you, Sobhaz, very much. So Dr. Brigham, if you would like to take over from there. And if you like, I can give you like a 1 minute warning, just at the 1 minute point. I'll just go like this for anybody.
Okay, that's good. I don't.
But you got about 8 minutes. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. Let me just see if I can get my little image up here again. I had screen stop sharing. Okay, let me do it again. I have a little image I wanted to share very, very quickly with you all. Let's see if I can get it up there. Can you see it now? No. Okay, I need to click one. You can?
Yeah, it's there now. It's just
we can
your
see
whole
it.
screen.
Oh, it's the whole screen. Let me just put it on the different.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, thank you so much. And then I'll turn my camera on after I take this image off. I just wanted to share this one because some of you may well be familiar with it. I suspect a lot of you have seen this before. I'm sorry, it's kind of small. It does come from the Quaker Peace and Service Friends House on Euston Road in London. And I share it because I was very much influenced by Quakers. My grandparents were avid Quakers, and my dad was raised as a Quaker. And essentially that means the belief in peace and cooperation. And as you know, the Quakers were very active in the abolitionist movement. And Quakers see the good in everyone. So no matter how society has defined a person, whether they define them as an evil, very bad person, a Quaker will always look for the good in everyone. So I wanted to share that with you because it says a little bit about the influences on me as I grew up. You know, this appears on a tapestry, the Quaker tapestry. We had it on tea towels, we had it on postcards. My parents had it up in a frame. So the two things I wanted to share about this image before I take it off is just this notion of the stages that are depicted here. And of course, it's a simplified understanding of cooperation. But I wanted to bring your attention to the fourth one. If you go down to the fourth, you'll see the two donkeys. You know, they were in conflict. They couldn't reach what they wanted to reach because they had to cooperate in order to be successful. It's that stage right there where the two donkeys are sitting down. They got a question mark in between them. That to me is kind of the essence of adult education. That is where the dialogue must take place, the critique, the analysis, the communication. And it's very much influenced by, I would say, a very humanistic philosophy. I would also say potentially a radical philosophy. And to me, it is an Afrocentric philosophy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by the Afrocentric philosophy in a minute. But I say that it has the potential for radical philosophy because it also has the potential to be very conservative. We know that people cooperate in order to oppress others. That is a fact. So we mustn't just assume that cooperation leads to a betterment in society. It can, in fact, result in more oppression. Maybe a few folks feel like, oh yeah, we can cooperate to oppress the marginalized groups in society, we see that as actually happening. So there's no doubt, there's no need for me to convince you, because you know that cooperation can lead to more conflict and more harm. And then to me, the final stage that you see at the bottom, there's two stages where they cooperated, they both got what they needed. In fact, they were able to indulge in what they required, which was the food in the first place. And just to point out that, of course, this image is a cartoon, so it simplifies images very easily. I mean, that's the point of it as a cartoon image, is to keep it simple. But of course, I just want to point out that cooperation can in fact look very chaotic. It could be messy, it can be complex. So this final image here looks quite neat and tidy, but of course it doesn't go there, does not necessarily go there, and certainly it doesn't necessarily go there easily or quickly. So that brings me to adult education. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to put my camera on and hope that the connection is still good. Okay, so I am a professor in the Faculty of Education at Mount St. Vincent University. I've been teaching in the master's program in lifelong learning since 2004. And so for me, this is where the cooperative movement comes in the curriculum, adult education, lifelong learning curriculum. And a key teaching in the adult education program is, for example, the Antigonish movement. So I suspect a lot of people who are listening would have a sense of the Antigonish movement, especially those from Nova Scotia. But I've always been very much challenged in trying to understand the role of others in that movement. When we study the movement, we are often looking at Father Thomas Cody, and Tompkins. And it's often, it's written about, and it's very much, I would say, a white perspective on the cooperative movement, on the history of it, on the story of it. But of course, there were other people around. There were people that were moving around in the world at the same time who are not captured in their involvement in the Antigonish movement. So the Antigonish movement is a fantastic example of understanding cooperatives. At the same time, it's important to understand that it does come often with a certain point of view, a certain perspective. And I know Sobaz and I were having a chat, and he was giving an example of his mom. I can't remember the name of the cooperative approach. Susu, yes. Thank you, Sobaz. Yes, there's so many other ways of doing this kind of cooperative activity. And the Susu movement, this is something that Black women and women in communities have been doing forever. And so I often want to just challenge what we do when we say, I am teaching adult education. In fact, what I've actually done is one of the books that I recently published is a curriculum, a book that's being used across the country. And I'm one of the editors on here with Robert McGray and Kayla Jubas. And in this book, I've included a whole chapter on Afrocentricity, which hasn't really had much coverage in the field of adult education that much. So I really am appreciative of the opportunity to be able to share an Afrocentric point of view, which brings me, and I hope you're keeping an eye on the clock there, Laurie. Okay, great. You just tell me. You can actually turn on your mic whenever you want me to be quiet. But I wanted to just bring my, 2 minutes. Thank you. Wanted to bring some attention to this notion of Afrocentricity because it has such a potential in perhaps challenging these ideas, the curriculum in adult education, which is the area in which I teach. And so I hope, let me see. There. Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at my screen. It's all over the place, but yeah, I really wanted to say a couple of things and then I'll stop. But one of the values, I think, of an Afrocentric perspective that I tend to focus on in the field of adult education when I talk about cooperatives and I talk about cooperation is really understanding that this Afrocentric approach is an intellectual, cultural, social, spiritual aspect, and it centers the learners of African descent. So if we look at curriculum, in whatever field we're looking at, if it is predominantly Eurocentric, it does do, as what Shobaz was talking about, it does do exclusionary acts. It takes away from the history, it moves the center onto the dominant, and then those less dominant perspectives get pushed to the side. And so sometimes we don't see our own stories, our histories, and our experiences in the dominant curriculum. And that's the example I gave was the anti-Ganesh movement. But I really wanted to, I guess, stress the point about Afrocentricity as being like a worldview or a philosophy that really centers peoples of African descent in any analysis. And it does provide a critical lens to address that general deletion of peoples of African descent, their histories and stories from the curriculum. And I feel the Afrocentric perspective can be very helpful in sort of disrupting the authority of the Eurocentric perspective. It brings a focus of racial disparities. It can bring a challenge of anti-Black racism and other forms of oppression. And yeah, to me, as I say, it provides a very critical lens. It is anti-colonial and it's anti-racist. So it's very helpful to spend a bit of time on that and, you know, in curriculum in general. And I just wanted to tie in back to what Shobaz was saying about the Ubuntu philosophy. And that, to me, is an important part of Afrocentricity, understanding that collective, the cooperative community aspect of what we do when we say we are doing education or when we're teaching. So the Ubuntu, to me, is a very critical piece, as well as the Sankofa. That, to me, is another aspect where some of you may be familiar with the image of the Sankofa bird, which is a bird that's looking backwards, and she has an egg in her beak, but she's turning backwards, and it's really depicting a bird that's moving forward, but her head is turning back with that egg in her mouth, which serves as a reminder that the knowledge of the past must never be forgotten, and that in order for us to move ahead, we need to retrieve the wisdom of the past to help future generations. So that Sankofa necessity is, to me, important to reclaim some of that subjugated knowledge. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you for listening. I'm hoping we'll have a fruitful dialogue. Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks. So Dr. Kumar, if you could take over from there and just introduce yourself and then also address the focus of today's conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Laurie. I have my notes in front of me. So just when you think my time is done, it's going to be a minute or so. I think I will be done beforehand. Just, yeah, let me know 2 minutes.
I'll let you know 2 minutes. Sure.
Yeah, just say it that Dr. Kumar, you have 2 minutes, or Ashwini, you have 2 minutes. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, those who are here to come to this very, very interesting conversational space. It was really nice hearing from Susie and from Shobaz, because my ideas, what I'm going to be sharing, is so very much connected to what they have shared in their presentation. First of all, I just want to thank Laurie for bringing me to this very interesting panel. And I have known Susie for a while, but it's always good to hear of her work in adult education and on Afrocentric education, which is very connected to my work on meditative inquiry. And it is so good to hear from Shobaz and the transformative work that he's doing in his own context. So my name is Ashwani Kumar. I teach in the bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs in the Faculty of Education. And the focus of my teaching and research is an idea and a practice that I have been developing through my studies and through my pedagogical work in the Faculty of Education over many years now. And this idea I call meditative inquiry. Basically, I think meditative inquiry is primarily about cooperation, and that's why I think it is very relevant for this conversation. It is a process of becoming aware of yourself in relation to life, in relation to people, in relation to others, and it questions the capitalistic Eurocentric ethos of holding individual as the center of everything. So it questions the very idea that an individual exists in isolation and can exist in isolation and can be happy and peaceful in isolated, individualized kind of structures. So when Laurie reached out to me to be part of the panel, I was a bit hesitant because cooperation and co-ops are not my area of research. But as I discussed more with Laurie, and especially when I heard Susie's and Sobhas's presentation, it seems that I think meditative inquiry perspective can offer some ideas in relation to cooperation. So in this brief, the brief remarks that I will be sharing with you, I will be talking about meditative inquiry perspective on curriculum and teaching, and what insights can it offer regarding cooperation, what are the factors that inhibit cooperation, and how can we enhance cooperation not only in the classrooms but also in social spaces. In my view, nothing in life can exist without cooperation. Everything exists because of everything else, and that's also so central to Ubuntu philosophy. This cooperative existence is true at all levels of life, including society and its educational institutions. While in the Eurocentric and capitalistic sense, there is always emphasis on the individuals and their achievements, historically, psychologically, socially, no one individual is larger than life. While there have been individuals in all fields who stand out, if one studies closely, nobody can excel without the work of the predecessors and the ancestors and the contemporaries. No work, no achievement ever exists in isolation. It is always connected to others. The human beings would not have achieved development and growth in all spheres of life without a collective cooperation, cooperative exploration. And I think this is not just a wishful thinking, it is factually true. Although in Eurocentric and capitalist thinking, we overemphasize individual at the expense of the community and the collective. While it is true that we cannot and do not exist without cooperation, there are forces that hinder mutual collaboration and peaceful existence. These forces have been responsible for widespread isolation, division, and conflict, which have been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are the factors that undermine cooperation and collaboration? I can discuss, like my first book, Curriculum as Meditative Inquiry. I've explored the question of division and conflict in detail, but for the sake of time, I'll just focus on 2 points here. One is, and I think it has been covered to quite an extent by Susie and Sobhas, but I'll just reiterate it for emphasis sake, that the one of the factors that hinders or undermines cooperation and collaboration is the overemphasis on individual achievement, constantly building the ego, the I, the me, and the self-centeredness, and we fuel it, we strengthen it through so many ways. Like the whole education system, if you see, it's based on the factor of comparison. We compare students with each other, and of course we compare ourselves in society. Everything is based on comparison, whether it comes to the airplane seats or anything. It's always the stratification, hierarchicalization, and that definitely fuels competitiveness and a sense of conflict in the society. Because when we rank people, when we classify people, when we sort people, we definitely bring out more competitive and conflictual and destructive tendencies in them, rather than creating a pedagogical and social space where cooperation, collaboration, and co-construction can take place. So I would say that has been one central feature that undermines or hinder the process of cooperation and collaboration.
2 minutes.
Okay, the other factor that is responsible for the lack of cooperation or isolation is the identification with larger groups. The nationalistic conflicts, the racial conflicts, the religious conflicts, they become when the identities became so warped that they are seen as something in opposition to the other people or to other group. So this factor on the individual and this factor on individual identification with the bigger group as opposed to other groups, I would say, are the key problems that negatively influence the possibility of cooperation. The true cooperative spirit can emerge when there is a deeper understanding of the forces and factors that create division and conflict within ourselves and between ourselves. My theory and practice of education that I call meditative inquiry is a process of understanding ourselves and our relationship to people and nature uh, and the environment around us. It's a process through which we examine the deeper causes of conflict within ourselves and in our relationships. I will just very briefly say, because I don't have the time. So I have, of course, it's a syncretic approach which I have developed through drawing upon traditions from India, from the development in Western curriculum theory and all that. But essentially what I do in my classroom is there is a lot of emphasis on self-reflection for a deeper self-understanding so that we can develop the capacity to understand others. There is a tremendous importance given to dialogue and sharing about everything at every step. And there is a sense of creative freedom through readings, through assignments, and through meditation exercises that bring students together in a cooperative and collaborative spirit of understanding and exploring and transforming together, rather than seeing each other as individual entities who are in competition with each other. Thank you, Laurie. I hope I made the time.
That's perfect. Thank you. So I just want to open it up at this point for our guests, our panelists, to, if you want to either express a comment of something that resonated with you of another guest speaking, or if you have a question for another guest.
Sorry, it's me, it's Susie. I just wanted to quickly make a comment on how I think perhaps like Ashwani, I was not sure that I could make a good contribution to the panel, but now having heard what others have had to say, I just see so many connections between what we are doing, particularly because I know Ashwani and his work. And so I guess I would just love to hear a little bit more about Shobaz's cooperative eye move. So that's just a comment. I see Isabel has her hand up, so I'll just turn off.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just going to do the panelists first, Isabel, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay. So Shobaz, do you want to speak to that a little bit? And
just Laurie quickly, and that's sure. My comment too. I would love to hear more from Shobaz as well.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, Susie.
Yeah. So I think that iMove started as a my when I was a film student. It was a struggle and addressed the tensions that I had around trying to really find my way. So the films that I created were very autobiographical, therapeutic, and as a consequence, the stories that I told, I did a film called Weekend Warrior, and it was very much about sort of my dealing with my own self-loathing and marginalization, and film I found to be very therapeutic. And that idea stayed with me as I sort of, have worked in different ways, programming with different people. So art, as I'm not a therapist, but I do use it therapeutically. But art as as a way of healing and a path towards healing has led me to this work. I discovered this, not discovered, one of the students, I was doing some workshops at NSCC, and one of the students there told me about kintsugi, which is a Japanese craft and now philosophy around damage, and that damage can be something that's beautiful. And I guess these things sort of challenge sort of Western, my Western upbringing, because I'm Black, but I do, just educated in liberal arts schools and brought up in London, England, very much a part of the Western fabric. Despite my African origins, but rediscovering those things and discovering different paradigms helped me to sort of find my way. And that's, so the I Move journey in a lot of ways has been my journey. It's been something I've shared with others, and thank God it's resonated with others. It's not just something that worked for me, it's something that has worked for others. And others across the board. So, regardless of sexual orientation, gender, race, class, this is an approach that seems to have resonance. Everybody is, in one way or another, damaged, broken. We all have trauma, different types. And I think everybody's looking for a healing path. And the organization I run in My Own Voice is just a manifestation of that for me.
Thanks, Sobaz. Given the time, I'm going to ask Isabel to jump in with your question or thought there as well.
Thank you. Just more comments that, everything you've said resonated so strongly in the work that I've done with Indigenous colleagues and communities. We've been working on epistemic violence, on challenging that cognitive imperialism so we could get at something like cognitive justice. And what they always encouraged me to do was not think about what I was doing for others, but what did it mean for me? And I grew up in Scotland, where I was not allowed to use the Scots language in formal education. And the first time I spoke Scots in public was in Banff, Alberta, at an Indigenous education event, conference. And it hit me such a shock to realize how I had internalized the colonial apparatus, right? How I was encouraged to be ashamed of who I was. And so, what you've been saying just resonates so strongly and tells a story of the enormous waste of cultural richness and diversity that we can all learn from. So thank you so much for your presentations.
Anyone else have any comments or thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to Isabel for her comment. I really appreciated you making that effort. And I loved what you say about one enormous waste of the richness of other perspectives. That's really the essence of what we're trying to not necessarily reclaim, but it's become like those have become subjugated knowledges when they shouldn't be. They should be free to be moved around and shared and understood and practiced. So yeah, I just want to say a quick thank you for that. And interesting, the Scottish perspective is unique too in that sense.
I also wanted to add a quick note to that. I think that's a very important point that you made, Susie. I have been teaching a course. Today was the last day. I finished at 4 and I'm here at 5 to do this panel. It's an intensive course. It was a course on meditative inquiry, and it was so good. And we were talking about, how brain becomes rigid in certain perspectives, and it seeks security in certain perspective, and then it feels insecure when it is faced with something else because it doesn't know how to handle it. So rather than becoming more pliable and flexible and embracing different ideas, it starts to resist them and creates walls. And so many walls we see around the world and in our local societies is because we become incapable of going beyond our limitations. And it's like psychologically and scientifically studied phenomena that when people work together, they work much better than when they work individually. And also, the more we are exposed to other ways of being, other cultures, the more brain becomes capable of being more tolerant in the true sense of the term, not just tolerating, but it actually become capable of engaging with different views. So I think it can't be overemphasized. Thank you so much, Isabel and Susie and Subhas.
Anybody else have any questions or any comments or thoughts to share? Karen.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again, Silvez. It was a couple of years ago we met like this over Zoom with Laurie. Nice to meet the others. Sorry, I'm running around trying to cook as I'm listening and waiting for my family to descend on me from the beach, Laurie. They're at Conrad's beach right
Yeah.
now. And yeah, I was just thinking about the reflections besides Sobaz, but the other two that had made about, do I belong here? How do I fit in? And I think Laurie, seeing that all these things do connect is so important, because the cooperative sector, can be, and I think, and as if I caught it, Ashwani, your second category is really where we put ourselves in these different groups, and then we have trouble figuring out, seeing how they connect. And I think that's really important, as well as your first point. I see a lot of that struggle also still in the cooperative sector. So I'm connecting a lot of dots with what everyone is saying, which is great. I'm going to share a link because on the Ubuntu piece, we did a symposium last year on cooperative governance, and there was a presentation from an individual in South Africa who specifically brought in Ubuntu and its connection to cooperative governance. That was the theme, but I haven't listened to it since last year. But again, just that not to have such an, it's really important not to think we're traveling in this narrow lane, that we are constantly pulling in and pulling off and different exits and connecting them back in. That's what I love about listening to all these different perspectives. That's all I want to say, Laurie. More of a comment, reflection on what.
Lovely. No, and definitely share. That would be great.
Thank you, Karen. That is wonderful comment. Thank you.
And Karen's actually at SMU.
Oh,
wow.
Karen,
So she's in
we are in the same
Dartmouth.
city.
That's great. She's in the city, so she's feeling the heat too. Well, thank you, Karen. I will look that up because it obviously was something that that we were thinking about already, the role of Ubuntu, and Shobaz had mentioned it too. So I'm really happy to see that link that you've given. Thanks for that. I just also wanted to make a quick comment about the role of the arts, because when Ashwani was talking about, how the brain sort of becomes reified, more secure with, what it knows, and the reluctance to veer into something a little bit less comfortable, I really feel like the role of the arts is so powerful. And, Shobaz said it obviously so well when he was talking about the arts, it really gives a way of healing. Filmmaking, he saw as therapeutic. And I also really embrace the arts as a professor, and I use the arts in so many ways, as many ways as I can, for the BED, the master's, or the PhD, just trying to find ways to make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable, or have some level of discomfort, because for some reason there's a lot of discomfort around the arts. There's a reluctance to sing, even though I think a lot of us would love to sing, or we sing in the shower, we do things quietly by ourselves, but collectively maybe we're a little, unless we have this, we feel like we have a brilliant voice, then we're more likely to share it. But yeah, that's all I want to say. It's just what a fantastic opportunity when you use the arts, whether it's painting, drawing, poetry, spoken word, film, or anyway, all of those things. Sorry, that's all.
Can I just make one quick comment, Laurie? Susie's today's class, the final class, was focused on creativity. And I asked all the students to bring one thing that inspires their creativity. And it doesn't have to be the established norms of creativity that you have to necessarily sing or paint. Anything that you feel makes you feel creative, rejuvenates you. And it was so, I sang as usual, and Neha was with me, but somebody played ukulele, somebody played guitar, and somebody just showing pictures of their family's work, what their daughters do. It's so central, and it really makes us more flexible, as you're saying, certainly, and brings us closer. We are not no
Yes.
longer far from each other. We are more vulnerable and more closer with each other, to each other.
So that's a lovely way for us to transition out.
Segue.
Sorry, Isabel, we're going to have actually, I'm going to invite Dr. Kumar to introduce some music that we're going to share as we exit this session. But I want to say thank you to everyone who participated. I hope this is the beginning of a great conversation, not just this one session, but that's something we can continue to. Certainly, I see connections amongst all of you, so I would love to explore this conversation in a deeper way. I wanted to mention a website will be coming related to Dr. Kumar's work and a new book that he's edited. And the website is meditativeinquiry.ca. It's not set up yet, but it will be coming in the next couple of weeks. Of course, you can learn more about Sobhaz's work at inmyownvoice.ca as well. And I really wanted to just, Dr. Brigham wrote a chapter for Dr. Kumar's new book, and it talks about Afrocentricity and holistic education and the importance of a spiritual sense of self in this work. And I just wanted to note that iMove has recently been asked by the federal prison system, the chaplaincy office, to create a pilot project about spiritual reintegration for people who've been incarcerated, and especially people of African heritage. So some interesting things going on that we may want to stay in touch on. And also that iMove has a co-op learning project that we're just finishing up now, and you can sign up for updates on the iMove website. And we will be releasing that in the next couple of weeks too, that is meant to be culturally appropriate and relevant for diverse audiences. So thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. If you can introduce your music, and then I'll play it, and that will play us out for today. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Laurie, for bringing us together. It's always fun. I love conversations and dialogues, so this is so good. So this song that I'm sharing with you, it's my own composition. It's in Hindi. So I'm going to quickly read the translation to you in English, or transcreation. It is so difficult to translate. And then Laurie will play it for you. And I hope you enjoy. I'm playing harmonium on it and singing, and I'm using electronic tablas, Indian style of drums. So I will read out to you the poem. It's called The Clouds of Hatred. It's very relevant to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. Why have the clouds of hatred overtaken our hearts? Has anyone ever found peace in conflict, animosity, or wars? We have turned the skies, the land, the waters into our battleground. Our destructive tendencies have caused chaos in all spheres around. Our hearts seem to have become insensitive like stones, and the delicate love seems to have disappeared in our woes. What will we be left with if we lose our hearts and souls? What could be worth achieving if we lose our true roles? Were we to take a deep look within and find our being, we would discover that which permeates everything and every being. You wouldn't understand, you wouldn't have understood the Hindi at all, I know, because it's not your language. So I hope that this helps you appreciate the song a little bit more.
Thank
you, everyone.
नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया, नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे किसी ने कुछ है पाया नफरत की आंधियों का। दिल हो गए हैं पत्थर और प्यार खो गया है। दिल हो गए हैं पत्थर और प्यार खो गया है। आँखों में सबकी जैसे इंसान सो गया है। आँखों में सबकी जैसे इंसान सो गया है। इंसान सो गया है। नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया। नफरत दुश्मनी से क्या किसी ने कुछ है पाया नफरत की आंधियों का। जब खो दिया खुदी को सब पाके भी क्या पाया। जब खो दिया खुदी को सब पाके भी क्या पाया। जो सुकून नहीं है दिल में तब हाथ में क्या आया। जो सुकून नहीं है दिल में तब हाथ में क्या आया। तब हाथ में क्या आया। नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया। नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया। इस रंज दुश्मनी से क्या किसी ने कुछ है पाया नफरत की आंधियों का। घर झांके अपने दिल में और ढूंढे अपनी रूह को। घर झांके अपने दिल में और ढूंढे अपनी रूह को। तब पाएंगे उसी को जो जग में है समाया। तब पाएंगे उसी को जो जग में है समाया। जो जग में है समाया। नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया। नफरत की आंधियों का क्यों दिलों पे छाया साया। इस रंज दुश्मनी से क्या किसी ने कुछ है पाया नफरत की आंधियों का।
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.